What if you lost everything in one night? What if the people you loved vanished into the chaos, and the only thing that could bring them back was a technology you never trusted? The night Hurricane Idalia made landfall, Jessica Palmer was closing up the diner on Route 14, just like any other Thursday. The air had been hot and thick with warning all week, and customers had stopped coming in 2 days ago. Still, she showed up, swept the floors, restocked the condiments, and tried to pretend the tension crawling down her spine was just another storm buzz. She'd lived through hurricanes before. But when the wind slammed into the side of the building with a groan like the earth was tearing itself in two, she knew this time was different. She rushed home, water already knee-high by the time she got to her driveway. The power had gone out hours earlier. Her 13-year-old son Evan had been alone with his tablet and his stubborn insistence that Starlink was going to fix everything someday. That was the last time she saw him, sitting cross-legged on the porch with headphones on and rain pooling in the yard, eyes glowing with the soft blue of the screen. Then the world went black. The next morning, silence. Trees snapped like matchsticks, power poles on their sides, the air heavy with salt and rot. Cell service, gone. Jessica screamed until her voice gave out, searching the house, the yard, the flooded street. No Evan. No neighbors. Just debris and stillness. Someone later said they saw a kid running toward the middle school shelter the night before. Maybe he got there. Maybe not. No phones meant no answers. Jessica wasn't the only one panicking. Across town, at the makeshift shelter in the Baptist church basement, people gathered with shattered eyes, whispering names and praying for bars on dead phones. News trickled in like blood through bandages. A trucker's CB radio said FEMA was delayed, roads were washed out, coastal towers were gone. A week, maybe more, before rescue. A young man named Luis had a ham radio rig and was trying to patch through to anyone, anywhere. But it wasn't enough. People needed internet. Not just for updates, but to find each other. Jessica sat on a cot, arms wrapped around her stomach, feeling like she might implode. And that's when she heard it, the low, crackling voice from a battery-powered radio someone had rigged in the corner. In times of disaster, everyone deserves a lifeline. Starlink is that lifeline. It was Elon Musk's voice. Recorded, maybe live, she didn't know. But he was promising something that didn't seem possible, satellite internet, direct to smartphones. A global emergency rollout. No dish required. Beta signals are launching to critical zones in the southeast United States. If your phone was recently updated or part of a compatibility test, it may receive limited access in the next 48 hours. Stay safe. Stay connected. Jessica blinked at the radio like it was speaking another language. She didn't believe in tech miracles. She still had an iPhone 8 and paper checks. Starlink was Evan's thing. He never stopped talking about satellites and low-orbit constellations. She never really listened. But suddenly, it mattered. Someone said certain phones might pick up the signal, newer ones, or phones with developer patches. Jessica didn't know what that meant. But she remembered Evan bragging a week ago that he'd joined some kind of Starlink early access group for kids. He'd installed an update from a subreddit. He said it was, just in case. She hadn't cared. She told him to take the trash out. Now it was all she could think about. She ran out of the church, through down trees and mud, back to her ruined house. It took an hour to dig through the rubble. She found his school bag, smashed but still zipped. Inside, his water bottle, a cracked comic book, and his phone. It was soaked but intact. She wiped it on her shirt, held the power button. Nothing. Her breath caught. She held it longer. Then a light, faint, flickering. The screen turned blue. The battery icon flashed red. And then, almost impossibly, a tiny white bar of signal appeared in the upper right corner. Starlink. The world spun. She didn't even understand what it meant, not really. But something about that tiny word made her cry. She raced back to the church. A tech-savvy teen named Aisha helped her plug into a solar charger. It took an hour, but eventually, the phone booted. She opened messages. She typed, "Evan, this is Mom. I have your phone. Are you safe?" Her hands shook. She hit send. The message sat there, unsent. The signal blinked. And then, slowly, so slowly, it whooshed away. Sent. Aisha cheered softly. Jessica felt like her heart was breaking open. For hours, she stared at the screen. Nothing came back. The signal flickered, dropped, returned. People gathered around her, watching, whispering. Other Starlink-compatible phones started receiving updates. One woman got a message from her husband in Alabama. A man from New Orleans learned his sister's house was underwater, but she made it out. The world was trickling back into reach. Just not her son. Not yet. Then it happened. 3 hours after she sent her message, the phone buzzed. A new notification. "Mom. I'm okay. I'm at the big tree. We found a girl. Her name is Lila. Phone is low. Please find us." Jessica screamed. Tears poured down her face. People hugged her. She dropped to her knees. He was alive. He was somewhere. The big tree. What did that mean? She stared at the screen, willing it to make sense. Aisha helped her message back, "Where is the big tree?" "I'm coming." The reply came minutes later, "North. Past the pond. In the woods. It's dry here." Jessica knew where that was. It was where her late brother used to take her when things were hard. A huge oak on a hill that had survived every storm since her childhood. Of course Evan went there. Of course he remembered. It was 5 miles on foot. She didn't care. She packed a bag, took the solar panel, and left at dawn. The shelter begged her to stay. She couldn't. Not when her baby was out there. Not when Starlink was the only tether holding them together. She walked through shattered neighborhoods, over broken bridges, past the corpses of homes and cars. She checked the phone every 10 minutes. The signal was weak, but it held. Occasionally she'd get a one-line update, "Still here. Lila hurt ankle. Bring help." Her body ached, her feet blistered, but she didn't stop. At the edge of the woods, her phone buzzed again. A new message, from a new number, "Jessica, this is Priya. I'm a systems engineer with Starlink. We're monitoring beta zones. Your phone is connected to our limited network. I'm routing a drone to your location." Jessica stared at the screen. Was this real? A drone? She typed back, "Yes. My son and a girl are up the hill. Injured. I'm close." Priya replied, "Stay put once you find them. Drone ETA 2 hours. You're doing great." The words felt like medicine. Someone saw her. Someone out there knew she existed. Knew she mattered. It was a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Jessica climbed the hill. Her legs burned. The sun was brutal. But she found the tree. And she found them. Evan was smaller than she remembered, curled in the shade with a girl about 10 years old, dirt-smudged and wide-eyed. Jessica collapsed next to them, pulling them into her arms, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're safe." They cried together. Then, high above, a hum. A dot in the sky. The drone. She waved. It descended with a supply crate and a voice from a speaker, "Hold tight. Emergency crew inbound within 24 hours. Evan looked up at her. I told you Starlink was real. Jessica laughed, even as tears poured down. She kissed his forehead. You were right. Behind her, the sky was blue and vast and full of satellites, and for the first time in days, she believed the world might actually find its way back. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jessica Palmer was never meant to be a tech person. She was born in 1986 in a two-bedroom ranch house outside Ocala, Florida, the youngest of three, raised by a mother who worked double shifts at a local grocery and a father who mostly drank and fixed lawnmowers. Her childhood was made of heat, silence, and moments of survival that felt normal until she got older and realized they weren't. She didn't have a smartphone until she was 25. Didn't trust online banking. Still kept paper receipts in a box under her bed. But none of that mattered when Evan came along. She was 23, single, broke, and terrified. Evan's father, Marcus, was a roadie for a minor country band and ghosted her by the second trimester. Jessica dropped out of college to work full-time at Red Roof Diner. She barely made rent. Her car broke down every 6 months. But somehow, she kept Evan fed, clothed, and loved. She sang to him at night. She taught him to read by 4. She told him, even when she couldn't believe it herself, that he could do anything. Evan was always different. Quiet, but focused. While other toddlers chased bugs, Evan watched clouds and tried to explain wind. At 8, he hacked a school Chromebook to install a custom weather app. At 10, he set up a miniature solar-powered weather balloon using a plastic bag and a GoPro knockoff. When he discovered Elon Musk on YouTube, everything changed. He watched every interview, every Tesla rollout, every Falcon 9 launch. He memorized orbital paths and debated propulsion tech with strangers on Reddit. Jessica had no idea what he was talking about half the time, but she supported him. Bought him used books on physics. Let him stay up late to live stream SpaceX launches. She even saved for 2 years to get him a used iPhone that he insisted had the specs to patch into Starlink beta tests someday. She thought he was dreaming. Now, in the middle of a collapsed world, his dreams were the only thing keeping them connected. But long before that signal and the storm, Jessica lived day to day with a heaviness she rarely admitted to anyone. Most people in her small town of Bellwood carried a kind of dull ache, generational, expected. You worked until your back gave out, then prayed Social Security didn't run dry. Technology was something for city people. In Bellwood, you fixed things with duct tape, not firmware. Her closest relationship growing up was with her brother, Michael. 6 years older, he was the first person who ever told her she was smart. He built her a fort in the woods and taught her how to climb trees and avoid their dad when he was drinking. Michael left for California after high school with a laptop, a dream, and $300. He lasted a year. He called one night, crying, said he'd been scammed by a roommate and lost everything. 2 weeks later, he was found dead, overdose. Jessica never forgave the world for that. Never forgave Silicon Valley, the lies about meritocracy, the illusion that hard work guaranteed anything. She hated tech culture after that. She didn't say it out loud, but every time Elon Musk's name came up on Evan's YouTube videos, it made her flinch. She thought it was all a fantasy meant to sell hope to kids while people like her brother got chewed up. But Evan wasn't Michael. Evan had something deeper, something relentless. He didn't just idolize Elon. He studied him. Read the biography twice. When Starlink launched its first satellites, Evan tracked the light trails in the sky with his telescope. When Musk announced he wanted to bring internet to the unconnected world, Evan made a school project out of it. His science teacher laughed. His principal told him to focus on more realistic ideas. Jessica wanted to storm the school that day. But Evan just kept working. He saved lunch money to buy a used battery pack. Found online forums with other Starlink-obsessed teens. He taught himself how to code, built a little app that tracked satellite coverage zones, and even managed to message someone who claimed to be a SpaceX beta tester. Jessica didn't believe it until one night, 3 weeks before the hurricane, Evan showed her a text on his phone that read, "Early signal update installed. Device compatible with STD2S pilot. Use responsibly." She thought it was a joke. Probably a scam. But Evan just smiled and said, "One day, people won't need towers anymore. They'll just connect to the sky." Now that sentence haunted her. That sentence had become prophecy. In the days before the storm, Jessica had tried to keep things normal. Evan begged her to evacuate, but she didn't have the gas money. She figured the power might go out for a day or two, that was it. She didn't imagine the water would rise so fast, or that Evan would run out the door to help someone and not come back. When the winds roared and the roof split open, she called his name until her throat bled. Then came the silence, the days of darkness, the shelter. And now she knew that all of Evan's obsession had led to this moment. She sat in the church basement that night, holding his phone like it was a sacred object. She watched the battery percentage crawl upward. She watched the signal bar flicker in and out like a heartbeat. She replayed every argument they'd had about screen time, about dreams, about Musk. "He's a billionaire who plays with rockets," she had said once. "We're real people. We don't have time for space." "He's trying to help, Mom," Evan had said. "Not everything's a scam." She never apologized. Now, she wondered if he'd been the only one in town who truly saw what was coming. She remembered when he told her about the big tree, how he wanted to build a tree house there one day, with solar panels and a Starlink receiver and a telescope aimed at Mars. She had laughed then. Said he'd have to settle for building a birdhouse first. But he never stopped dreaming. That's what scared her most. The world had a way of crushing dreamers. She knew that too well. But now it seemed like maybe, just maybe, the world was bending, ever so slightly, toward them. Aisha told her that the Starlink satellite signals were still unstable, but improving. Priya, the mysterious engineer who kept messaging her, explained that the network had never been tested like this before. "We built Starlink for remote villages, deserts, oceans," Priya wrote. "But now we're seeing it's the key to disaster zones. No towers. No problem. Satellites don't fall." Jessica read that line again and again, "Satellites don't fall." It felt like poetry. She learned that the constellation overhead was growing every week. That new launches were happening monthly. That Musk had even hinted at making basic access free for critical zones. She didn't know if she believed all that. But she believed in the signal. She believed in the messages. She believed in Evan. She looked around the shelter and saw what it meant for others too. A mother 3 cots down received a message from her daughter in Miami. A veteran got word that his medication was en route by drone. A farmer found out his cousin in Louisiana had survived. Each ping was a lifeline. Each signal a thread reconnecting the shattered map. For years, Jessica had felt like a ghost, someone the world didn't see, someone just surviving. But now, holding this phone, getting messages from the sky, it was like she was finally plugged into something bigger. Like all her struggles, all her losses, had led her here for a reason. Maybe she didn't trust billionaires. Maybe she still hated what tech had done to her brother. But maybe, just maybe, this was different. Maybe technology wasn't the enemy. Maybe it just needed the right dream behind it. Evan's dream. Their dream. And now, thanks to a flicker of signal and a satellite passing silently overhead, they had a chance to build something new. Together. The church basement, once a place of potlucks and prayer circles, had turned into a makeshift survival bunker where hope flickered like dying candlelight. Jessica sat on the edge of her cot, her back aching, cradling Evan's damp phone in her hands, watching the signal bar pulse in and out like a slow, stuttering heartbeat. Around her, the low hum of whispered conversations filled the air, punctuated by the occasional sob or cough. The air was thick with mildew and sweat, but no one complained. They were the lucky ones. Above ground, the streets were still flooded, cell towers had snapped like twigs, and every road out of town was either underwater or blocked by debris. FEMA had dropped a radio message that aid might arrive in 2 more days, maybe 3, depending on flight conditions. Some said it could take a week. Jessica didn't have a week. Evan was out there, injured, somewhere in the forest north of town with a little girl named Lila, and every minute mattered. She checked the screen again. One new message from Priya. Emergency drone teams have been deployed to Florida corridor. ETA 18 hours to your sector. Keep location static if possible. If you move, update coordinates immediately. Jessica stared at the blinking cursor. Her fingers were slow, stiff. She typed back, "My son is at the big tree north of Pond Trail. I'm heading there now. Can't wait 18 hours. Send." She glanced at the phone's battery, 33% and rising thanks to the solar mat. The sun had returned that morning, cruel and hot, and everyone had scrambled to lay out panels and collect rainwater. The phones that were compatible with Starlink's beta patch had become the most precious things in town. At least a dozen people had come to her, asking if she could check on loved ones, send messages, ping coordinates. Jessica helped as many as she could, but her focus was singular: find Evan. The image of him curled at the base of that old oak tree haunted her, though she'd never seen it, only imagined it from his message. It had been almost 12 hours since she got his first ping. Anything could have happened in that time. She packed what little she had: 2 bottles of water, a can of peaches, a flashlight, a poncho, and the portable solar panel folded neatly into a backpack. The church's elderly pastor tried to stop her at the door, told her it wasn't safe. She thanked him and left anyway. The road north was more mud than pavement. Cars lay on their sides like dead animals. Power lines draped across the ground like tangled vines. She moved slowly at first, careful with every step, listening for distant cries or signs of movement, but the silence was overwhelming. The kind of silence that pressed into your chest and whispered lies. Maybe he's not there. Maybe you're too late. Maybe the signal lied. She walked faster. Her legs burned. Her throat was dry. She didn't care. She passed the remnants of her old school, the one where she had dropped Evan off just 2 weeks ago for his coding club. The roof was gone now. The flags shredded. Desks floated in a pond that had once been a basketball court. She kept moving. After 2 hours, she reached the edge of the woods. Her shoes were soaked. Her calves cramped with each step. But she saw it ahead, the trail, or what was left of it, leading toward the place Evan had always called the Big Tree. When he was younger, they used to go there with a picnic blanket and peanut butter sandwiches. He said it was the only place in town where the sky felt big enough to dream. She hadn't thought of that in years. Now she clung to it like a prayer. The forest was dense, branches snapped and scattered, leaves soggy and slick. Her phone buzzed again. A signal spike. She stopped to read it. Still here. Lila sleeping. Scared. We're okay. Please hurry. Her breath caught in her throat. She typed quickly, almost there. Stay put. I love you. She didn't wait to see if it sent. She picked up the pace, climbing over a downed log, slipping once but catching herself before her head hit a rock. Her knees were scratched, arms scraped, but she didn't stop. The sky above flickered through the canopy, sunlight fractured through the leaves. She thought she heard a branch snap ahead, maybe an animal, maybe wind. Then she heard it again, a voice. Faint. A name. Mom. Her heart stopped. She froze, listening. Mom! Down here! She turned and ran, her legs numb. She followed the voice, crashing through the undergrowth until she saw it, a clearing, sunlight pouring down onto the big oak tree, its limbs spread wide like arms ready to embrace her. At the base, curled in a blanket of leaves and dirt, were Evan and a small girl with tangled red hair. Jessica fell to her knees and pulled him into her arms, holding him so tightly she thought she might break both of them. Evan clung to her, sobbing, whispering, "I knew you'd come. I knew it." She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, ran her fingers through his matted hair. "I've got you. I've got you, baby. You're okay." The girl stirred, blinking up at Jessica with wide, frightened eyes. "I'm Lila," she whispered. "My grandma's house floated away." Jessica nodded, reaching out to touch her shoulder gently. "You're safe now, sweetheart. I've got you too." She helped them both sit up, checked Evan's legs, bruised, swollen, possibly sprained but not broken. Lila's ankle looked worse. She wrapped it as best she could with a scarf. Then she pulled out the solar panel and phone, checked the signal. 1 bar. She typed quickly, found them. Injuries non-life-threatening. Need evac ASAP. Coordinates attached. Send. She waited. 10 minutes. 20. No reply. The sky darkened. Clouds rolled in. Thunder in the distance. Her phone buzzed. Drone en route. 2 hours. Stay visible. Use emergency flare if available. She didn't have a flare. But she had a flashlight and a bright yellow poncho. She tied it to a branch and laid the phone in the sun, hoping it would keep charging. They huddled beneath the tree as the wind picked up. Evan leaned into her, his eyes fluttering with exhaustion. "You used Starlink," he murmured. She smiled through tears. "You were right. It worked." He grinned, pride flickering across his dirty face. "Told you it wasn't just rocket stuff." "I know, baby," she whispered. "I believe you now." Lila rested her head on Jessica's lap. The air turned cold. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavy. Jessica held them both, praying the drone wouldn't miss the clearing, praying the signal wouldn't drop. She thought about Michael, how he had died alone, disconnected. And how somehow, this signal from the sky, this invisible thread, had done what no landline, no tower, no road could. It had pulled her to her son. It had brought her through the chaos. She didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if FEMA would show up, or how long they'd be stranded. But she knew this, the world had changed. Starlink wasn't just a tech dream. It was a lifeline. And as long as those satellites kept circling overhead, maybe, just maybe, none of them were truly alone anymore. The drone arrived just after sunset, its distant hum like the whisper of a promise long delayed. Jessica spotted its blinking lights first, 2 white, 1 green, moving in a steady arc above the trees before circling and slowly descending into the clearing. Evan sat up, his eyes wide, Lila clutched her hand tightly, and Jessica stood, waving the flashlight in slow arcs the way Priya had instructed. The device hovered 15 feet above ground, stabilizing against the wind, then slowly lowered a metallic pod the size of a large duffel bag. It landed with a soft thunk, and a voice, calm, artificial but gentle, emerged from the drone speaker. "Emergency medical kit deployed. GPS confirmed. Rescue ETA within 8 hours. Stay safe. Starlink is with you." The drone lifted silently and vanished into the night sky as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a glowing pod and a sense of wonder Jessica couldn't quite put into words. She opened the pod, revealing blankets, flashlights, protein packs, water, a basic first aid kit, and most importantly, a rugged satellite-enabled radio phone with a printed label, emergency direct line, Starlink Ops Center. She turned it on and a warm blue screen blinked to life with a tone that sounded like hope itself. Seconds later, a call came in. Jessica. This is Priya. The voice was clearer than before, no static, no lag. We've got your location pinned now. First responders are en route via high ground ATV from the east. You'll hear them before dawn. Can you hold out until then? Jessica exhaled, her voice shaking. Yes. We've got food, light, and each other. Thank you, Priya. I mean it. I don't even know how to thank you. Priya's voice softened. Just stay safe. That's what matters. After the call ended, Jessica helped Evan eat a protein bar, tucked Lila into a dry blanket, and wrapped her own jacket around the two of them. She leaned against the base of the great oak tree, listening to the wind in its branches and watching the stars between gaps in the canopy. She wondered which one was Starlink. Which tiny light was the reason she wasn't still alone in a flooded town, searching ruins and praying for miracles. She thought about how quickly everything had changed. A week ago, she wouldn't have known the difference between a satellite and a shooting star. Now, she could feel their presence, silent sentinels in orbit, bridging the gap between hope and despair, between isolation and connection. As the night deepened, Evan stirred. Do you think the satellites are always watching? He asked, his voice small. Jessica looked down at him. Maybe not watching like people, but helping. Reaching. Like, ears in the sky. Evan nodded. I think that's what Elon meant. Not just internet. Safety. Everywhere. For everyone. Jessica stroked his hair. You were right to believe in it. He smiled sleepily. I just wanted us to be safe. And connected. And I wanted Lila to know the world wasn't all bad. Jessica's throat tightened. She looked at Lila, who had curled into Evan's side, her tiny frame finally resting peacefully. You did good, baby. You did real good. For the next few hours, she dozed in and out, waking at every rustle, every shift of the wind, clutching the satellite radio like a lifeline. Around 4:30 a.m., she heard it, the distant, rumbling growl of engines. She jumped to her feet, grabbed the flashlight, and began to flash it in wide arcs through the trees. Evan sat up, blinking, as Lila stirred beside him. It's them, Jessica whispered, barely believing it. Moments later, headlights pierced the edge of the clearing. Two ATVs, headlights dimmed but steady, pushed through the undergrowth. Men and women in FEMA gear leapt off, calling names, checking vitals, wrapping the kids in thermal blankets. One man, tall and lean with a calm voice, came straight to Jessica and asked, "You're the one using the Starlink relay?" She nodded. Yeah. My son had the patch. The man gave a low whistle. You're the first person we've found because of that. The whole region's been silent. You have no idea what this means for future response models. She looked over at Evan and Lila, already seated in the back of one of the vehicles, sipping water, wrapped in warmth. It means everything, she said. You don't know how many people that signal helped. He gave her a nod. We're going to need to debrief you later. Elon's team wants to talk to survivors who got direct-to-phone connection. They're fast-tracking some kind of case study. Jessica blinked. You mean like, an interview? Yeah. They're calling it real-world proof. You're one of the first. She didn't know how to feel about that. All she cared about was that they were safe. That Evan was in one piece. That Lila might find her grandmother again. But deep down, something stirred, a spark she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Maybe even pride. The ride back into town was slow but steady. The roads were still half submerged, but the high-riding vehicles made it through. As they entered Bellwood's outskirts, Jessica saw signs of life, people outside, waving, cell phones raised to the sky, searching for signal. A woman approached the convoy as it slowed, holding a cracked Samsung phone high above her head. "Do you have it?" she cried. "Starlink? Can I check for messages?" Jessica reached out the window and offered the phone Priya had sent. "Here," she said. "Use this." The woman sobbed as she typed. Jessica turned back to the driver. "How many others are getting the connection?" "Hard to say," he replied. "The beta patch only hit about 20% of phones in this region. But they're accelerating the rollout. Musk authorized a burst update last night. They're calling it Project Lighthouse. Global satellite-to-phone service, no dishes required, prioritizing disaster zones and underserved regions." Jessica stared at the rising sun breaking over the horizon, casting golden light over the battered town. "Lighthouse," she murmured. "That's a good name." When they arrived at the shelter, cheers broke out. People clapped, shouted her name. Jessica climbed out of the ATV in a daze. She had been gone barely 36 hours, but the change was palpable. A Starlink mobile unit had arrived, complete with solar cells and backup routers. A technician was setting up a tent to assist residents with compatible phones. A new sign had been hung near the shelter entrance. "Connection Center, powered by Starlink." Aisha ran to her, hugging her so tightly Jessica nearly lost her balance. "You did it," she whispered. "You made it back." Jessica hugged her fiercely. "We did it. Evan did it." That afternoon, a video call came through on the emergency unit's uplink. A staffer handed her a tablet. "You're wanted on a call. It's Starlink HQ." Jessica stared at the screen. The call connected. A face appeared, sharp, intense eyes, tousled dark hair. Elon Musk himself. She nearly dropped the tablet. "Jessica Palmer," he said, smiling. "It's good to meet you. We've been watching your relay activity closely. Your son's phone carried the first live life-proof test of the new STD2S protocol. It worked better than we imagined." Jessica blinked. "I don't even know what to say." Elon nodded. "You don't need to say anything. You proved it. You and Evan. And Lila. You made history." He paused, his tone softening. "How's your son?" "He's safe. He's tired, but okay. He said you'd help us. He never stopped believing." Elon smiled faintly. "Then he's the kind of mind we need. Give him a hug from me. And keep that phone. It's been upgraded for lifetime Starlink access. No charge. You're now part of the early global test group." Jessica swallowed hard. "Thank you. For everything." "No," Elon said, leaning forward. "Thank you. The stories are what prove the tech. You gave us the story." The screen faded to black. Jessica handed the tablet back, her hands trembling. Around her, people gathered to hear about the call. The story spread fast. Within hours, national news had picked it up. Florida woman reaches son using Starlink emergency signal. Jessica Palmer, once a diner waitress, now a symbol of a new frontier in communication. But none of that mattered to her the way it did to the world. What mattered was Evan, asleep on a cot, safe and whole. What mattered was that somewhere overhead, a grid of satellites was listening, watching, ready. The world had changed. The sky wasn't just stars anymore, it was connection. It was promise. It was hope. The media storm hit faster than the hurricane ever had. Jessica didn't know how the story had spread so quickly, but within 2 days of the rescue, her name was everywhere, on Twitter, on CNN's bottom ticker, on a viral TikTok that someone's niece at the shelter had thrown together using clips from the Starlink tent and a photo of Evan holding the emergency radio. People were calling it a miracle, a revolution, a preview of the future, and Jessica barely had time to process it before her old flip-flop town of Bellwood became a temporary hotspot for tech journalists, satellite engineers, and camera crews looking for a hero. They found her in the back of the church shelter, still wiping mud from her jeans and trying to keep Evan fed, hydrated, and resting. He was doing better each day, and Lila had been reunited with her grandmother, but the weight of the attention was something else entirely. Jessica didn't want to be famous. She wanted her life back. But there was no going back, not now, not after Elon Musk himself had looked her in the eye, even if it was just through a screen, and thanked her. What stuck with her most wasn't the fame or the flood of interviews, it was how the story resonated with people. She started getting messages from places she'd never heard of, a goat farmer in rural Mongolia who had never had internet but now used Starlink to message his son in the city, a teacher in Kenya who taught math using satellite connectivity, a storm chaser in New Zealand who tracked weather patterns with nothing but a phone and a satellite beam. Each message ended the same way: "Your story gave me hope." Jessica had never been anyone's symbol before. It made her nervous. But it also gave her a sense of responsibility she couldn't ignore. So, when Priya reached out again from Starlink HQ and asked if Jessica would consider coming to Texas to share her experience in person for the company's internal summit, she said yes. Not because she wanted to, but because Evan had looked at her and said, "You have to, Mom. People listen when you talk about it. You make them believe." And belief, as she was starting to realize, was the first building block of change. They flew her out 2 days later, first class. It was her first time on a plane. She watched the clouds from the window with a kind of reverence. Somewhere above them, she knew, was the very satellite that had saved her son. When they landed in Austin, a black car was waiting, with a driver who smiled but didn't say much, just handed her a water bottle with the Starlink logo on it and drove her past miles of gleaming new tech parks and sprawling construction zones that looked more like science fiction movie sets than anything she'd ever seen. The Starlink campus was enormous, sleek metal buildings shaped like prisms and domes, solar panels covering every roof, drones zipping overhead delivering equipment, and digital kiosks scattered across the grounds that displayed real-time global connection data. She saw glowing dots moving across a map, signals from phones just like Evan's, lighting up in places that had once been blank. Inside the main building, she was greeted by Priya in person for the first time, a tall woman with calm eyes and a voice that cut through noise like a scalpel. "You made it," Priya said, shaking her hand. "Welcome to the future." Jessica smiled nervously. "I'm not sure I belong here. I still write grocery lists on paper." Priya chuckled. "You belong more than most. You lived it. And this world we're building, it needs people like you to remind us who we're building it for." The summit was unlike anything Jessica had ever seen. She sat on stage in a modern auditorium with curved LED walls, facing an audience of engineers, developers, logistics managers, and satellite specialists from around the world. A moderator guided the conversation, but it was Jessica's story that held the room. She told it plainly, no embellishments, no buzzwords, just the truth, the flood, the signal, the fear, the rescue, the way a phone with no bars had connected her to the sky. There were tears in the audience. Silent nods. People scribbling notes, not about algorithms or latency, but about families and forests and what it meant to survive when everything else failed. Afterward, a young coder approached her with trembling hands. "I built part of the STD2S code," she said. "I've never seen how it works for real. Thank you for showing us." Jessica hugged her. "That's the difference. That's the power of connection." The room erupted in applause. Afterward, Evan pulled her aside, his face flushed with pride. "You were amazing," he whispered. "You sounded like someone who belongs up there." She smiled at him, brushing hair from his face. "I just spoke the truth. The rest is because of you." He looked up at the sky, at the tiny blinking lights now visible even to the naked eye if you knew where to look. "Do you think I could work there someday? Like Priya?" Jessica looked at him for a long moment. I think one day, you'll build the next version. Something even better. He grinned. Maybe I'll call it Link. She laughed, the sound clean and full. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem so far away. The stars no longer felt distant. And in that space between earth and sky, Jessica Palmer found something unexpected, not just signal, not just connection, but purpose. A new kind of story was being written. One where even the quietest voices could be heard across oceans, across floods, across darkness. All they had to do was reach up. It started with one classroom in Bellwood Elementary, then another, and soon the entire school was connected. Not just connected in the traditional sense, plugged into some aging DSL line or outdated router, but lit up with direct-to-satellite internet that didn't require towers, cables, or permission from any major telecom provider. Jessica stood beside Principal Herrera as students filed in for what had quickly become known as Launch Day. The morning Starlink went live in every classroom. Kids were already talking about it as if it were some kind of science fiction dream come true, Evan included, who had insisted on getting there early to help test the signal strength with his teacher. The district had approved the installation after a small pilot showed real-time connectivity with less than 40 milliseconds of latency, which meant not only could the kids stream educational content and access up-to-date materials, but they could now Zoom with classrooms across the world, download STEM modules, and participate in live Q&A sessions with guest speakers from universities and even NASA. Jessica had been asked to speak again, just a few words for the opening, but standing there at the front of a class full of eager kids, most of whom had lived through the same storm and power loss that nearly took her son, her voice caught in her throat. She looked out at the students and asked, "How many of you lost power during the storm?" Every hand went up. "How many of you had no phone signal?" Again, almost every hand. "How many of you were scared?" Silence, then a few nods, and finally, one brave voice from the back, "Yeah." Jessica smiled softly. "Me too. But now we have something that works even when nothing else does. And it's not just about school. It's about staying safe, staying connected, and staying hopeful. Because when the sky is your connection, you're never completely alone." She stepped aside, and the applause that followed wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was sincere. That afternoon, Jessica received a call from Priya again, this time with a different sort of invitation. "We're expanding the Lighthouse program globally," Priya explained, her voice steady but tinged with excitement. "You were one of the first success stories. We'd like you to be part of the advisory panel we're forming, real users helping us understand what real people need. It's a paid position. You'd help guide product rollout, user education, emergency response use cases. Interested?" Jessica didn't even hesitate. "I'm in." She'd gone from serving coffee and struggling to make rent to helping design global communication infrastructure. And it still didn't feel real. But she felt a strange calmness accepting the role, like it was just the next chapter she was meant to walk into. In the months that followed, the scope of Starlink's impact began to take shape in ways no one could have fully predicted. In the wake of record-breaking wildfires in California and Canada, Starlink-enabled phones became the only lifeline for thousands who had been forced to flee. In India, entire villages skipped the need for cell towers entirely, connecting to the world overnight with ruggedized budget smartphones that now came pre-installed with the Starlink protocol. Schools that had once relied on chalkboards and out-of-date books were now streaming chemistry lessons from Tokyo, philosophy lectures from New York, and even virtual art galleries curated by AI. Jessica was part of weekly Zoom calls with people she never imagined she'd speak to. Rescue operators in the Philippines, educators in remote Alaska, public health officials in sub-Saharan Africa, each one sharing how Starlink's direct-to-device service had transformed lives. And all of them had heard her story. One day, in the middle of a panel discussion about emergency communications, a man from Uganda spoke directly to her. "Jessica," he said in heavily accented English, "your story is what convinced our council to invest in satellite-ready phones for our clinics. Before, women in labor couldn't reach help. Now, we have births happening safely again. You saved more than your son. You started something. Jessica was speechless. She had never thought of herself as a leader. But somehow, this had become her new reality, not as a symbol or a spokeswoman, but as a bridge between the high-tech future and the everyday world people actually lived in. Her voice mattered because it wasn't technical. It was emotional. It was human. She became known for a single phrase she often repeated in interviews: technology means nothing if it can't be felt by the people who need it most. That line found its way into Starlink's marketing, etched onto the wall of their new emergency innovation lab in Texas, right beneath a mural of the Bellwood oak tree where she had found Evan. Jessica kept working. Not full-time, but often enough that she found herself traveling more than she ever had, to conferences, to town halls, to disaster recovery centers where she helped train volunteers in how to set up a connection using just a portable charger, a solar mat, and a satellite-ready device. Sometimes Evan came with her. Other times, she brought stories back for him, about an island school in Micronesia, about an elder in the Andes who now read to grandchildren over video, about a teenage girl in Syria who used Starlink to attend remote coding boot camps. Evan started building his own app. Simple at first, a platform that showed where Starlink signal was strongest in any given area and gave safety tips for setting up emergency communication pods. Then he added user-submitted tips, then map overlays, then video logs. By the time he turned 14, his app had 100,000 downloads and was used by 5 global NGOs. "I call it Skytrack," he told her one night as they walked home, the stars above clear and sharp. "Do you think Elon would like it?" Jessica smiled. "I think he'd ask if you wanted to intern." And sure enough, a week later, an email came through. Subject line, Skytrack. It was from Musk himself, or his team, at least. They'd seen the app. They wanted Evan on a summer mentorship track. Jessica printed the email and framed it. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked. Evan looked at her, more serious than she expected. "We can't go back to how it was, Mom. Not after everything. The sky changed. So I have to change too." Jessica nodded, her throat tight. "Then go. Learn everything you can. And remember what started it." "You," he said quietly. "You're what started it." She shook her head. "No, baby. We both did. You reached up. I just followed the signal." By the time fall came around, Starlink had announced the full global rollout of their direct-to-smartphone network, starting with the top 50 underserved regions. Their long-term goal: total planetary coverage, every human with access to the sky. No contracts. No SIM swaps. Just the device you had and the will to connect. The tagline was short, bold, and quietly revolutionary: signal. Anywhere. Always. Jessica kept working quietly behind the scenes. She turned down big interviews. She stopped posting online. But her name was whispered in places she never imagined: in war rooms, in boardrooms, in classrooms. People called her the Sky Mother, a name she would have laughed at just a year earlier. Now it made her smile. Not because she believed the myth, but because she knew the truth. The future wasn't built by heroes or billionaires. It was built by love, by urgency, by a mother's stubborn will to reach her son. And by the quiet hum of satellites overhead, always listening. Always ready. The invitation came in a midnight email with no subject line and only a single sentence in the body: "Can you come to Boca Chica?" Jessica stared at it for a full minute before the second email landed, this one with more details: flight arrangements, a formal letter of invitation signed by a Starlink mission commander, and a short note from Priya: "You've seen what Starlink can do from the ground. It's time you saw it from where it begins." Boca Chica, Texas, SpaceX territory, the heart of Starbase, the launch site where hundreds of tons of steel and fuel and coating magic lifted into the stratosphere to build the satellite constellation now orbiting Earth. Jessica had seen clips, of course. She remembered watching one of the early Starship launches on Evan's tablet, both of them huddled on the couch, watching the rocket flame pierce the sky. But going there, standing in the middle of it, that felt like something out of someone else's life. Yet a week later, there she was, wearing a visitor badge with her name on it, being walked through the perimeter of Starbase by a quiet man with a shaved head and a tablet. "You'll see the integration hangars first," he said. "Then mission ops. Elon may stop by if his schedule opens." Jessica blinked. "Wait, you mean, he's here?" The man just smiled. "He's always near when we launch. This one's special." She didn't understand what he meant until she entered the control room. The walls were covered in displays, real-time orbital data, weather patterns, atmospheric readings, and in the center of the room was a model unlike anything she'd seen. A phone. Just a regular phone. Suspended in a magnetic case. Beneath it, the words, "First signal from orbit, public demonstration." "You're launching a satellite just for phones?" she asked. "No," someone answered behind her, "we're launching the next era of human connection." It was Elon. No cameras, no crowd, just him, standing in a simple black jacket, sipping coffee, his gaze as sharp as the launch trajectory on the nearest screen. "Jessica," he said, walking toward her, "it's good to finally meet in person." She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. "Thank you," she murmured. "For everything." He waved it off. "You thanked me already. I just push buttons. You're the reason people trust what we're building. Today's launch, this one isn't about beta or early access. This is the one. This is direct to anything. Phones, watches, emergency beacons. It'll wake up every Starlink-enabled chip in the world." Jessica took a deep breath. "And you wanted me to see it?" "No," he said. "I wanted you to push the button." The room fell silent. She looked at him, then at the console. "Me? Why not you?" he said. "You represent who this is for." A technician stepped forward with a digital pad. "Ready on your command, Ms. Palmer." Jessica approached the pad like it might burn her. The screen displayed a simple interface, ignition protocol, ST-Nova deployment. A countdown timer was paused at T00:10:00. "Just press when you're ready," the technician said. "You'll initiate the final sequence. From there, it's automated." Jessica hesitated. She looked around the room. Engineers, developers, techs, media observers, everyone watching her, not with impatience, but with reverence. Like she was something more than the woman who once sat beside a flooded oak tree with a nearly dead phone and a prayer. Jessica inhaled deeply, her finger hovering over the button. Then she pressed. The countdown resumed. The room filled with low murmurs, final checks, and rhythmic beeps. Elon stepped beside her and nodded at the main display, where a live feed from the launch pad showed the rocket, taller than any building she'd ever stood next to, illuminated in blue-white light. At T00:00:05, the boosters ignited. The base of the rocket erupted in steam and flame. And then, like a dream rising from the earth, the ship began to ascend. Jessica watched as it broke through the clouds. "That satellite you launched," Elon said, "will be the first to provide two-way real-time voice transmission directly to a standard mobile phone without a tower. No relay. No middleman." "That's not possible," Jessica whispered. "It wasn't," he replied. "But now it is." The rest of the day passed in a blur. The rocket reached orbit. The satellite deployed. And somewhere over the Pacific, it blinked to life and connected to a phone in a fishing village that had never had a signal before. Priya called Jessica from the village just minutes later, holding up the phone. "We're online," she shouted, voice cracking through with the crispness of fresh signal. They're calling family. They're crying. Jessica leaned against a table and closed her eyes. That night, Elon hosted a small dinner at the edge of the launch site. Engineers, project leads, a few international journalists. It was casual but electric with energy. Jessica sat across from a developer named Mateo who had grown up in Guatemala and had written the compression algorithm that allowed text messages to be delivered in under 1 kb. My grandma still doesn't believe me when I tell her she can text from her garden now, he laughed. She thinks it's sorcery. Jessica smiled. In a way, it is. High-tech sorcery. With a little heart. Mateo leaned in. You know, we've had the tech for a while. What we didn't have was the story. The thing people could connect to. You were that bridge. You made it real. Jessica was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up. I didn't do anything special. I just needed to find my son. Mateo shook his head. That's the most human reason of all. Later, as the group thinned out, Elon came by her table and sat down. We're working on phase 3 now, he said casually. The goal is mesh autonomy, satellites talking to each other without Earth-based input. Instant global patching. And we're building Earth terminals that will be powered by kinetic energy, just shaking the phone will power a ping. Jessica looked at him. That's insane. That's the point, he said, half smiling. Insanity is the first step toward inevitability. She laughed, not because it made perfect sense, but because somehow, in that moment, it did. She looked at the stars above, and this time, she saw them differently. Not as unreachable lights in the distance, but as tools, connected, purposeful, alive. When she flew back to Bellwood, the town had changed again. More signal nodes, more solar panels, more visitors. But it wasn't the tech that changed her most, it was the realization that the story hadn't ended. It was still unfolding, carried by satellites and signals and every person who reached out across the void to connect. 1 week later, she stood in a field just outside of town, holding a small device no bigger than a pen, speaking into it softly. This is Jessica Palmer, she said. I'm testing signal relay for the Novanet 1 satellite, operational as of last Tuesday. If you're hearing this, you're part of the change. Her voice carried to a base in Antarctica, to a mountain outpost in Nepal, to a hospital in Sudan. Real time. No lag. No lost moments. Just connection. The woman who once had no voice, no options, no signal, now spoke to the world from a simple patch of Earth. The sky was no longer a mystery. It was a network. A lifeline. A promise kept. Bellwood had become a hub of quiet transformation since the Novanet launch, but Jessica felt an odd restlessness. It was as if every time the sky soared higher, she was being pulled to reach it. Still recovering from the rush of being at Starbase, she woke before dawn most days, logging into virtual calls with weather monitoring groups, rural clinic coordinators, and emergency task forces. She spent afternoons checking on the school's satellite connection, making sure every tablet was updated, wiring backups into the power grid. Evenings found her editing short videos in the shelter office, documenting lessons learned from the storm, tips for preparedness, instructions for patching phones, and how to rally community resilience using satellite tech. She posted them on the Sky Connect channel they'd set up for Bellwood users, a small audience at first, but growing rapidly as word spread. Evan, meanwhile, was deep into Skytrack development. His app was evolving beyond mapping. It offered live chat rooms for users in active emergency zones, loaded offline disaster kits, allowed people to ping for help in simple SOS pulses. His code had made it into the Novanet demo and caught the attention of several NGOs. One evening, over tacos in the kitchen, he looked up at Jessica. "Mom, I think this app saved someone today." She looked at him and he tapped his phone. "It's here. From a number in Louisiana." She texted that the app guided volunteers to her flooded home roof and got her evacuated hours before the water rose. They both stared at the screen. Everything felt bigger now. Not just Bellwood, but the entire network connected above. She remembered how helpless she felt after Michael died, how small, how forgotten. But with Evan's app and NovaNet and Nova satellites scanning the globe, no one would feel that small again. That week, Priya invited Jessica to a global debrief. An online meeting with Starlink engineers, satellite operations, and regional emergency coordinators from 5 continents. The meeting started with a montage of crisis zone stories, wildfire evac in Chile, famine alerts in Sudan, glacial floods in Nepal. Then came Bellwood. A short clip, Jessica at the Oak, the drone deployment, Elon pressing the final button. Priya looked at her on screen and said, "You ready to talk about scale?" Jessica took a breath. "I want every school in America to have this. I want every ambulance to carry a satellite-enabled phone. I want people in storms or war zones or wherever they are to never have to feel lost." The room erupted in messages of agreement. A British pharmacist noted it could revolutionize medical supply chains. A Kenyan educator said classrooms could share curriculum in real time. A Brazilian traffic coordinator asked if satellite routing could help direct disaster response fleets off-grid. Jessica answered each thoughtfully, "Let's pilot it in vulnerable regions next. Then expand from there. Build open-source guidance. Teach people to patch. Make it the default." They closed the meeting planning task forces, rolling launches, community training. Jessica felt the weight of it all, but also the beauty. Her story was a ripple that had become a wave. That night, the town's Sky Connect channel lit up with users around the globe testing Evan's SkyTrack, updating phones, sharing satellite signals from obscure spots, on boats, mountains, forests. People posted signal selfies, under ancient stars and satellite trails, documenting that humanity could touch sky without towers. One video from a woman in Greenland showed her elderly father sending a text for the first time in decades. A small act made profound. The next morning, Bellwood Elementary held a Sky Day. Students built cardboard satellites, learned orbital paths, and wrote messages to far-flung classmates. Jessica led a session, watching kids beam as their messages were pinged through real satellites. One girl shyly handed her a drawing, a stick figure mother and child under a satellite smiling. On it, printed in crayon, "Thank you for the sky." Jessica knelt and hugged her. Her eyes stung as she whispered, "Thank you." But not for the drawing, the thank you was hers. That afternoon, she received notice that SkyTrack hit 1 million downloads. She showed Evan, who jumped up and down. His face glowed with excitement and pride. "Mom," he said, "it's our story now." She hugged him and thought, "My son wrote the next chapter." The next morning brought a complication. A news alert flagged that a telecom lobby group in Washington, D.C. was raising concerns. Direct-to-device satellite internet could threaten national security, interfere with regulated spectrum, and undermine rural telecom providers. They called for hearings. Within hours, the story spread through Capitol Hill. Suddenly, Starlink's rollout wasn't just about connection, it was political. Jessica felt a chill. She brought the news to Priya, who responded calmly, "We expected this. They're lobbying fast. We need real stories, real voices. Yours. Evans. Bellwood's." So began a whirlwind week. Journalists flew in. She gave interviews on camera, in print, even a live panel debate with the FCC's rural comms chief. The lobbyists argued that satellite pings disrupted local cell traffic. She countered, "Tell that to a mother who couldn't call for help because towers were underwater. Connectivity isn't a threat, it's survival." She shared Evan's app story. She showed his download numbers, testimonials from users. She invited lawmakers to visit Bellwood, to see the school, the signal stations, the community training. A senator agreed. A representative came. They toured, they spoke with students, they saw phones connect under a solar rack in a flooded field. They watched a live SOS ping be relayed through Novanet. At the end, the senator shook Jessica's hand. "You changed the debate," he said quietly. "We need to make policy catch up, or we risk being left behind." It felt like victory, but also like a beginning. Because now it wasn't just survival anymore. It was infrastructure. It was policy. It was rights. That weekend, after the hearings, Bellwood held a connection celebration. There was a barbecue, a mini science fair, balloons shaped like satellites, and a ceremony where the mayor presented Jessica and Evan with the town's highest honor, the Community Beacon Award. They stood together at the microphone. Evan spoke first, shy but steady. "I made something that helps people. Thank you to my mom for believing." Then Jessica, "We all helped. We all reached. And now the sky reaches back." The applause washed over her. She looked at her son, at neighbors crying, at visiting delegates who clapped and smiled. And she realized, this was no longer just her story. It was theirs. Their storm. Their rescue. Their future. A future where connection was a right, not a privilege. And as fireworks, tiny drones forming satellite-shaped bursts, lit the sky above Bellwood, Jessica whispered to Evan, "We did good, kid." He looked up and said, "We did great." And in that moment, the sky felt like home. Bellwood skies had never looked the same after Sky Day's celebration. Even on ordinary afternoons, people paused to look up, searching for satellite glints among the stars. For Jessica, the shift in the town's spirit had taken root in its essence. People spoke of connection not just as utility, but as belonging. It was a small town, but its influence reached far beyond its borders now, and that weight of purpose pressed gently on her shoulders. News of the telecom panel, the legislator visits, Evan's Skytrack success, all of it made waves, and often on quiet evenings she found herself scrolling through social media tags like #connection is a civic right and #Starlink stories, many originating in Bellwood. Somewhere, people laughed as satellite signals queued on desert rooftops and glacier-touched villages came alive with messages they never thought possible. Yet as all this unfolded, there came a moment where the global wheels turned in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. On that Friday night, she was back in her home, which had been rebuilt sturdily after the storm. The oak tree was young again at their edge. Her phone buzzed, a call from Priya marked urgent. She answered immediately. "Jess, big development," Priya said, voice crisp. "There's a sabotage campaign. Telecom's lobbyists paid off a senator to introduce a prohibition on consumer direct satellite handsets. They're calling it Spectrum Integrity Act. We're expecting it in committee next week." Silence. Then a cold rush of adrenaline. "We can't let that happen." Priya explained their plan. Starlink had to submit thousands of testimonials, case studies, videos, data points, from real users around the world showing how direct-to-device connectivity saved lives, reinforced infrastructure, enabled economies. And they wanted Jessica at the center. Bellwood as the story that tipped the balance. Her pulse hammered. She closed her eyes, feeling again that initial fear when she lost Evan, that same urgency she'd carried into the woods. "I'll do it," she said. "Tell me what you need." Over the weekend, she and Evan worked in their rebuilt basement, which doubled now as the Sky Connect studio, filming new testimonies from Bellwood citizens, the school nurse who used satellite SMS to coordinate medevac, the farmer who sold produce online during the storm, a teacher tracking global events in real time. They organized local volunteers to send footage from wildfire evacuees in Colorado, flood survivors in Indonesia, nomadic herders in Mongolia. Evan's Skytrack app collected them all. By Sunday night, they had compiled dozens of full-length videos, hundreds of short clips. When Monday came, they submitted everything to Starlink and sent the package to Capitol Hill's Communications Committee. They also arranged for a live remote testimony during the hearing, with Jessica speaking from Bellwood, and Evan's app streaming to screens on the other end. On Tuesday, Jessica sat before the congressional subcommittee, lights too bright, cameras too close, microphones angled toward her like silent sentinels. She steadied herself, thinking of Evan asleep at home, of Lila safe with her grandmother, of the millions of lives touched by a signal from the sky. She began, "Members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Jessica Palmer. I stand before you as a mother, a teacher, an ordinary citizen from Bellwood, Florida. But today, I stand also for every family who regained connection when their cell towers fell. Every student who found a classroom when their school was flooded. Every mom whose emergency signal saved her child's life. And the technology behind this is not abstract. It's in our phones. It's in our homes. It's in our hearts." She clicked a button, and the first clip hummed across the screen, the nurse, wiping tears as she recounted arranging a life-saving airlift. Another click, a wildfire evac, a blurry yet undeniable image of signal bars returning mid-forest. A farmer showing his online sales box, shipping goods across state lines. They were all real. They were all Bellwood by extension. The room was silent. Phones scribbled. Journalists leaned in. Then came the question from a senator, "Ms. Palmer, the opposition argues that satellite signals can interfere with local cell towers, affecting rural providers. What do you say?" Jessica's voice was firm. "Tell that to the family who couldn't reach help because the towers were underwater. The question is not interference, it's intention. Satellite connectivity isn't a replacement for local infrastructure. It's a backup. A shield when the primary fails." She paused. And to suggest that saving a life should take a backseat to corporate turf is not just short-sighted, it's immoral. More silence. Then one senator nodded slowly, digging through his notes. They moved on. At the end, they called for the remote link. Jessica spoke again, "Live from Bellwood, I'm sitting in my rebuilt kitchen. My son sleeps upstairs. I ask you, what's more important, saving him, or protecting profits?" There were audible gasps. The footage had done its work. Later that afternoon, reporters crowded her inbox with messages, "Senate pushes back on Spectrum Act after satellite testimony." It was dripping with early victory. And by evening, social media and mainstream news outlets gushed with Bellwood's story. But for Jessica, the fight was far from over. The real work lay ahead, ensuring policy translated into law that protected satellite-to-device communication as a backup public safety utility nationwide. The next weeks passed in a whirlwind. Repeated hearings, town hall debates, press conferences. She flew to Washington with Evan, first class again, though now the travel felt familiar rather than strange, and they met with senators, telecom commissioners, emergency response professionals, even international delegations drawn by the novelty of a mother from Bellwood sparking genuine policy change. Everywhere they went, Skytrack and Novanet were proof. They heard stories of mountain rescues, hospital pings, off-grid villages. And each was a chisel wearing away obstruction. By the time the committee voted, they'd amended the Spectrum Integrity Act to include an exemption for emergency and underserved use of satellite direct-to-device services. It passed by a narrow margin. Outside the Capitol, thousands of supporters celebrated, families, first responders, educators. Jessica and Evan stood at the center, feeling the warmth of shared relief. Their fight had brought legislation that protected this lifeline. But even as they celebrated, the work continued. Back home, teachers asked for satellite modules built into curricula. Emergency services requested rapid deploy trailer units. NGOs asked for Skytrack to integrate global alert systems. And engineers began to design next-gen satellite chips small enough to fit in wearables. Jess made plans, a non-profit to train volunteers, a scholarship fund in Michael's name for rural tech students, an annual Sky Summit in Bellwood that would bring together communities impacted by natural disasters and technological inequality. And through it all, her voice remained the same, calm but unwavering, lived in, clear. Her story had started on that hill under the oak tree, tethered by a flickering phone and a simple question: will they come? They came. And now, because of that question, millions more could be reached. One night, as fireworks from a local celebration painted the sky, she stood beside Evan on their porch. He said quietly, "Mom, do you think Michael would have been part of this?" She looked at the fireworks, then at the satellite glint overhead. "I think he'd be building it," she replied. "I think he'd be reaching, too." Evan smiled. "Then we'll build it for him." She hugged him close. Beneath the wide Florida sky, they stood rooted, connected, and ready, because the sky was more than signal now. It was belonging. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The dawn after the Capitol victory was calm but electric. Bellwood awoke not just to a new day, but a new sense of possibility. Jessica moved through the quiet streets with a mix of exhaustion and hope. The fight had been long, but now the path forward was clear. The victory at the committee was a foothold, but the broader battle for full national and global rollout was only beginning. In the weeks that followed, the Palmer household became a hub of activity. Jessica and Evan worked side by side, fielding calls from NGOs, government agencies, and tech innovators eager to scale the direct-to-device Starlink program. One morning, as she reviewed plans for satellite training workshops in rural Alabama, her phone rang. It was David, an old friend and fellow advocate, now coordinating relief efforts after a major hurricane in Puerto Rico. "Jess, we've got a situation," he said, voice tense. "Cell towers down, power out. The island is dark in many places, and traditional comms are crippled. We need Starlink phones on the ground fast." Jessica didn't hesitate. Within hours, she coordinated shipments of preloaded Starlink phones, SkyTrack app installs, and solar chargers. She and Evan pulled together a virtual volunteer brigade, guiding Puerto Rican communities to set up emergency comms hubs and share real-time updates on damage and needs. Watching video streams from the island, Jessica saw families messaging loved ones for the first time since the storm. She read texts from doctors coordinating triage. She listened to young students live streaming lessons from makeshift classrooms. It was proof: direct satellite connectivity was no longer a futuristic dream but a lifeline for survival and rebuilding. At the same time, Starlink engineers rolled out a new generation of compact satellite modules that could be embedded directly into smartphones without bulky attachments. Jessica was invited to the official product unveiling in California, where Elon Musk himself acknowledged her role as a grassroots catalyst. She felt humbled but determined. This was only the start of making satellite connectivity truly universal. Back in Bellwood, the community's involvement deepened. The local school added space tech and connectivity to the curriculum, with Evan leading workshops on coding SkyTrack features and satellite signal optimization. Parents volunteered for Connectivity Corps, training neighbors on emergency protocols using Starlink phones. On weekends, Jessica hosted Sky Talks, where experts streamed lessons on everything from radio frequency basics to disaster psychology. These gatherings felt more like celebrations of resilience and human ingenuity than mere education. Through all this, Jessica wrestled with the lingering grief of Michael's loss, the fuel behind her mission but also a shadow she could never fully escape. Late one night, after a particularly draining video call with Puerto Rican volunteers, she stepped outside under the star-studded sky. The Milky Way stretched wide above her, and somewhere beyond the atmosphere, hundreds of Starlink satellites shimmered in tight formation. She imagined Michael looking down from some quiet place, proud that their family's pain had sparked such change. Yet the ache of absence was real. She pulled her jacket tighter, thinking how fragile life was, how every connection, human or digital, was a thread worth fighting for. The next morning brought a surprise. Evan had been invited to present Skytrack at a global technology conference in Geneva. His app was gaining traction not just in the Americas, but across Africa, Asia, and Europe, regions where satellite internet could leapfrog decades of infrastructure gaps. Jessica knew this meant long flights, intense schedules, and a new chapter beyond Bellwood. But she was proud. She packed his bags, told him to rest, and promised to keep their work going at home. Evan's departure was bittersweet. The night before he left, they sat together on the porch, watching satellites trace slow arcs overhead. "Mom," he said, "this is bigger than Bellwood now. We're helping people all over the world." She nodded. "You're right. And every signal we send is a promise, no one should be left in the dark." After Evan's trip, Bellwood settled into a new rhythm. The town became a model of community-driven connectivity, inspiring others nationwide. Journalists often visited to document how satellite internet could transform rural America from the inside out. Jessica began working with policy groups to draft national guidelines for emergency satellite use and digital equity programs. At the same time, new challenges emerged. The increased satellite traffic raised concerns about space debris and orbital crowding. Environmental groups lobbied for responsible satellite deployment and urged companies like SpaceX to minimize impact on astronomy. Jessica found herself navigating these complex issues, advocating for balance between innovation and stewardship. One afternoon, a package arrived at her doorstep. Inside was a framed photo of Michael smiling beside the oak tree, taken years ago before the storm. Attached was a note from Lila, "For you, so you always remember why we reach for the stars." Jessica held the photo close and felt the unspoken bond between past and future, the grief that powered her, the hope that propelled everyone connected beneath those vast skies. She realized that Starlink was more than technology, it was a shared story of loss, resilience, and the human drive to connect no matter what. As the year drew to a close, Bellwood's lights glowed brighter. Satellite dishes on rooftops, solar panels charging phones, kids talking about careers in space tech. Jessica looked around and knew that every challenge, every setback, every victory had led here. To a place where connection wasn't just data but lifeblood, where community met the cosmos, and where a mother's love had helped change the world. With the sky as their limit and stars as their guides, they were ready for whatever came next. Jessica woke to the hum of activity that had become the soundtrack of her life. Bellwood was buzzing with preparations for the upcoming Sky Summit, the annual event she and Evan had launched to bring together people impacted by satellite connectivity breakthroughs. The small town was alive with visitors, researchers, tech innovators, emergency responders, educators, and families who had stories to tell. It was the culmination of years of effort and the perfect stage to show the world how far they had come. She moved through the community center, now transformed into a vibrant hub of displays and demos, feeling the weight and joy of the moment. Posters lined the walls showcasing images from around the globe, villagers in remote mountain ranges communicating by satellite phone, children in flood zones attending virtual classes, farmers tracking weather patterns on their smartphones. Each image carried a story, a connection, a triumph. Evan was coordinating the technical demonstrations with precision, his youthful enthusiasm infectious. He had grown into a confident leader, his voice steady as he explained the newest Skytrack updates and satellite chip designs to curious attendees. Jessica caught his eye and smiled. Despite the whirlwind, they had built something lasting, something meaningful. The keynote speaker arrived, a renowned astrophysicist who had been an early critic of satellite megaconstellations but now spoke about their potential for social good when deployed responsibly. His address was a call for balance, innovation paired with environmental stewardship and ethical considerations. Jessica nodded along, knowing the truth of his words. The successes of Starlink's connectivity had not come without controversy. Night skies around Bellwood had changed. Amateur astronomers voiced concern. Environmentalists worried about space junk. The conversation was complex, but the summit embraced it openly. After the speech, breakout sessions filled the day. Jessica hosted a panel titled, "Connecting the Unconnected, Stories from the Ground," where families and first responders shared their experiences. Tears flowed, laughter bubbled, hope surged. She watched as barriers between strangers melted in the shared human need to reach out and be reached. During a break, a woman approached Jessica. She introduced herself as Maya, a teacher from a remote Alaskan village. Maya's school had recently received Starlink phones through a non-profit partnership. "You don't know what this means to us," she said, voice thick with emotion. "Our kids can finally join the world. We can get medical advice, weather alerts, even cultural exchange programs. It's a lifeline." Jessica felt the familiar swell of purpose. This was why the battles, the sleepless nights, the setbacks, all of it mattered. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the summit transitioned into a community celebration. Music filled the air, children ran between tents lit by LED strings powered by portable solar units, and satellite dishes glowed softly like silent sentinels. Jessica found a quiet moment with Evan on the outskirts, looking up at the stars. "Mom," Evan said, "sometimes it feels like we're changing history." She smiled. "We are, Evan. We're giving people a chance to write new chapters, no matter where they start." The next morning, Jessica received a call from a representative at the Federal Communications Commission. They wanted to discuss expanding Starlink's direct-to-device program as part of the upcoming infrastructure bill. The opportunity was enormous but required careful negotiation. Jessica and Evan spent days preparing detailed proposals, emphasizing the program's public safety benefits and economic potential. They included data from the summit's testimonials, technical analyses, and pilot projects. The FCC meetings were intense. Lobbyists representing traditional telecom companies pushed back fiercely, worried about market disruption. But Jessica's calm determination, backed by real-world impact stories and growing public support, held firm. One afternoon, after a marathon session, the chairperson nodded. "Your data and testimonies are compelling. We see the value in integrating satellite direct-to-device services into national infrastructure planning." A small victory, but one that felt monumental. Meanwhile, Bellwood continued to thrive. The town's schools incorporated satellite tech into STEM programs, local businesses leveraged online markets, and emergency services adopted SkyTrack as a standard communication tool. Jessica worked with healthcare providers to pilot telemedicine via Starlink phones, bringing doctors to patients in areas where clinics were miles away. The impact was profound. One patient, an elderly man with chronic illness, credited his life to prompt remote care made possible by reliable satellite connectivity. Jessica's advocacy also inspired similar initiatives nationwide. Communities in Appalachia, the Navajo Nation, and the Mississippi Delta reached out for support in deploying satellite-based communications. The network of connected places grew like a living organism, pulsing with hope and resilience. Yet challenges remained. The technical teams grappled with maintaining satellite networks amid increasing space traffic. Government agencies deliberated on spectrum allocation as more players entered the satellite internet arena. Jessica found herself at the crossroads of innovation, regulation, and ethics, striving to balance progress with responsibility. One evening, after a particularly challenging policy meeting, she sat on the porch reflecting. The stars twinkled above, satellites gliding silently across the sky. She thought of Michael, how a single tragic moment had sparked a movement reaching far beyond Bellwood's borders. Her heart ached but also swelled with pride. They had turned loss into connection. Into hope. Into life. As the weeks turned to months, Jessica and Evan expanded their nonprofit, SkyConnect Alliance, training volunteers worldwide in emergency satellite communications and digital literacy. They forged partnerships with global humanitarian groups responding to natural disasters and conflict zones, where traditional networks were unreliable or compromised. Each success story reinforced the power of accessible connectivity to change lives. One morning, Jessica received a message from an old friend in Africa. A remote community had used Starlink phones to coordinate a clean water project, dramatically improving health outcomes. The message ended with a simple line, "Thank you for reaching us." Tears came unbidden. The journey had come full circle, from Bellwood's oak tree to the farthest corners of the earth. As the year closed, Jessica stood at the edge of the town's field, watching children chase fireflies beneath the glow of distant satellites. She whispered to herself, "This is why we reach for the stars, to bring everyone home." Jessica's mornings began to blur into a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and strategic planning sessions. The small victories in Bellwood had blossomed into a nationwide movement, and now the stakes were higher than ever. The federal government was taking serious steps to integrate satellite direct-to-device technology into national infrastructure, but resistance lingered among legacy telecom giants wary of disruption. One chilly morning, Jessica sat in her home office overlooking the rebuilt oak tree, her mind racing as she prepared for a crucial presentation to the Senate Appropriations Committee. She knew this meeting could unlock critical funding to accelerate satellite phone distribution to underserved communities. Evan was by her side, reviewing data on his tablet, eyes bright with determination. "Mom, we've got the numbers. We just need to tell the story," he said. Jessica smiled, drawing strength from his youthful optimism. "Then let's make them see why connection is a right, not a luxury." When the day came, Jessica stood before the senators, her voice steady but charged with emotion. She recounted stories from Bellwood, Puerto Rico, remote Alaskan villages, and beyond. Communities transformed by access to Starlink phones and Skytrack's seamless connectivity. She described a farmer in Kansas coordinating crop sales despite floods washing out roads, a nurse in Appalachia alerting ambulances when cell service failed, a classroom in Nigeria where students connected to teachers halfway across the world. The room was silent as she played video clips of these moments, voices and faces of real people whose lives had changed. A senator leaned forward. "Ms. Palmer, how do you address concerns about cost and long-term sustainability?" Jessica answered, "This technology empowers communities to be self-reliant. It creates opportunities for local businesses, healthcare, and education. The initial investment is offset many times over by the economic and social benefits. And with ongoing partnerships, we're building a system designed for longevity, with community involvement at its core." Another asked about security. Jessica explained the rigorous encryption and safeguards built into the network to protect user privacy and prevent interference. As questions came, she felt a sense of connection with the room, not just policymakers but people who could be allies in this mission. After the hearing, the senators conferred, then voted to allocate significant funding for Starlink direct-to-device expansion and educational outreach programs. It was a monumental win. Back in Bellwood, news of the funding invigorated the community. Schools expanded their tech programs, nonprofits coordinated larger deployments, and local businesses invested in online platforms. Jessica and Evan led workshops on satellite tech integration, sharing knowledge with neighboring towns and state officials. But as progress accelerated, challenges emerged. Increased satellite traffic in low Earth orbit raised alarms among astronomers and environmental advocates. Jessica found herself mediating conversations between SpaceX engineers, regulators, and the scientific community. They worked together to develop improved satellite designs that minimized light pollution and incorporated deorbiting technologies to reduce space debris. Meanwhile, new competitors entered the satellite internet market, driving innovation but also sparking regulatory battles over spectrum allocation and orbital rights. Jessica realized the importance of maintaining transparency and fostering collaboration to navigate this complex landscape. One afternoon, a package arrived from a distant village in Mongolia. Inside were handwoven textiles and a letter from a teacher who used Starlink phones to connect her students with global educators. The letter spoke of hope, curiosity, and a world that suddenly felt smaller. Jessica treasured the gift, a reminder of the profound human impact behind the technology. As the months passed, Jessica's nonprofit, SkyConnect Alliance, grew into a global network supporting satellite communication education, disaster response coordination, and digital equity advocacy. They hosted virtual summits featuring voices from every continent, sharing stories and strategies. Through it all, Jessica remained grounded by memories of Michael and the belief that every connection was a thread weaving the world closer. One evening, after a long day, she stood on her porch looking up at the stars. The satellites shimmered in silent orbits, invisible lifelines connecting millions. She whispered, "This is just the beginning." The journey from a small Florida town to global impact had been driven by grief, resilience, and the unyielding human desire to connect. With every signal sent and every life touched, Jessica knew they were building a future where no one would have to face the dark alone. The success of the Senate funding injected new momentum into Jessica and Evan's work, but it also brought fresh challenges that tested their resolve. The Starlink direct-to-smartphone initiative was expanding rapidly, and with that growth came heightened scrutiny and unexpected obstacles. One morning, Jessica received a troubling call from a grassroots organizer in the Mississippi Delta, a region long plagued by infrastructure gaps and economic hardship. "Jess," the organizer said, voice tight with frustration, "the phones arrived, but the signal's patchy and inconsistent. People are disappointed, and some say the technology isn't living up to the promise." Jessica understood the stakes. In communities like the Delta, where decades of neglect had bred skepticism, every failed connection was a setback not just for access but for trust. She assembled her team for a rapid response, coordinating technical support visits and community forums to listen directly to users' experiences. They discovered several factors undermining service quality: hardware installation errors, local topography challenges, and intermittent satellite handoffs during adverse weather. Rather than view these as failures, Jessica framed them as opportunities to adapt and improve. She spearheaded an initiative called Connect Care, pairing local volunteers with technicians to provide hands-on support and education. At a packed town hall meeting in Greenville, Mississippi, Jessica spoke with conviction, "We know this technology isn't perfect yet, but it's a beginning. Together, we will learn, fix, and grow. Your voices guide us." Slowly, trust began to rebuild. The volunteers became ambassadors, and service reliability improved as updates and fixes rolled out. Meanwhile, back in Bellwood, Evan was spearheading the development of a next-generation satellite chip that promised better energy efficiency and faster speeds. His youthful ingenuity was balanced by Jessica's seasoned perspective, and their collaboration sparked breakthroughs that impressed even the most skeptical engineers. As the direct-to-device program gained traction worldwide, so too did the conversation about satellite internet's environmental footprint. Jessica found herself navigating tricky terrain, balancing the undeniable benefits of connectivity against concerns about space debris and light pollution that threatened both scientific observation and space sustainability. In a pivotal moment, she convened a global summit that brought together environmental scientists, astronomers, engineers, and policymakers. The dialogue was frank and urgent. Together, they explored solutions: improved satellite design with matte coatings to reduce reflectivity, orbital slots carefully managed to prevent congestion, and active debris removal technologies. Jessica's leadership fostered a spirit of cooperation that transcended traditional tech rivalries. One particularly memorable session featured a young astronomer from Chile who explained how megaconstellations affected her research but also acknowledged the potential for satellites to democratize access to knowledge for her rural students. This nuanced conversation became a blueprint for future satellite deployments worldwide. At home, Jessica balanced her public life with moments of quiet reflection. The pain of Michael's absence remained a quiet undercurrent, a wellspring of motivation and sorrow. She found solace in community rituals, a weekly Sky Watch where neighbors gathered to observe satellites crossing the night sky and share stories. Children would point upward, imagining the invisible threads connecting their homes to distant places. These gatherings were a reminder that technology was more than circuits and signals, it was about people, belonging, and hope. One day, Jessica received an invitation from the United Nations to present at a high-level forum on digital inclusion. Her message was clear and heartfelt: connectivity was a human right, a tool for empowerment that could bridge divides and save lives. She shared data and stories from the front lines: remote clinics using telemedicine, disaster zones maintaining communications, isolated students joining global classrooms. The presentation resonated deeply, leading to new international commitments to support satellite direct-to-device programs in underserved regions. Around this time, Evan embarked on a fellowship with a space research institute in Europe, further broadening his perspective and skills. Jessica felt a mix of pride and loneliness but knew this was part of their journey. They kept their bond strong through daily calls, exchanging ideas and encouragement. Back in Bellwood, Jessica expanded SkyConnect Alliance's training programs, integrating VR simulations that allowed volunteers worldwide to practice emergency communication scenarios. The technology was cutting edge, but the heart remained the same: a commitment to connecting the unconnected. Then came the winter storm that tested everything they had built. A fierce blizzard swept across the Northeast, crippling power grids and knocking out cell towers for millions. Emergency responders struggled with communication breakdowns, and residents faced isolation in freezing temperatures. Starlink satellite phones became critical lifelines, enabling coordination of rescue efforts and delivery of supplies. Jessica monitored updates around the clock, coordinating SkyConnect volunteers to provide remote support and troubleshooting. The crisis underscored the vital importance of resilient satellite networks, but also highlighted gaps in preparedness and accessibility. In the storm's aftermath, Jessica advocated for policy reforms to integrate satellite connectivity into national emergency planning. She worked with agencies to distribute phones to vulnerable populations and train first responders, transforming reactive measures into proactive infrastructure. As the year closed, Bellwood prepared for its annual Sky Summit, now a symbol of global connection and resilience. Jessica reflected on the path from grief to global impact, from a single mother's determination to a worldwide movement. The stars above twinkled as satellites traced silent arcs, each one a beacon of possibility. The story was far from over, but one truth remained clear: connection was the future, and the future was bright. Jessica stood at the edge of the packed auditorium, watching the crowd filter in for the annual Sky Summit in Bellwood. The event had grown from a small-town gathering into a major international conference focused on satellite connectivity, digital equity, and innovation. Delegates from all over the world had arrived: scientists, policymakers, educators, entrepreneurs, and families whose lives had been transformed by the Starlink direct-to-smartphone initiative. The energy in the room was electric, buzzing with anticipation. Jessica recalled how, just a few years earlier, she had been a grieving mother grappling with loss and uncertainty. Now she was at the helm of a movement connecting millions across continents. The opening keynote was given by a Nobel laureate in physics who spoke about the convergence of technology and humanity. She emphasized that satellites were more than hardware orbiting Earth: they were bridges to understanding, opportunity, and hope. Jessica's heart swelled with pride as she listened. Panels explored emerging topics, integrating AI with satellite data for disaster prediction, ethical frameworks for global connectivity, and innovative educational programs using direct-to-device internet. In one session, Evan presented the latest advancements in low-power satellite chips, demonstrating prototypes that promised to extend device battery life dramatically. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Outside the auditorium, interactive exhibits showcased real-world impacts: students in rural India attending virtual science fairs, health workers in the Amazon coordinating remote diagnostics, farmers in Kenya tracking weather patterns to optimize crops. Jessica mingled with attendees, hearing stories that reaffirmed her mission's importance. She noticed a group of young girls from a refugee camp who had traveled hundreds of miles to attend. Their eyes sparkled as they explored the exhibits, inspired by the possibilities that connectivity offered. After the formal sessions, Jessica took the stage to share her own journey. She spoke candidly about loss, resilience, and the power of human connection. "When we connect," she said, we are stronger than our challenges. Technology is a tool, but people, our stories, our hope, are the true drivers of change. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. The evening culminated in a community celebration under a star-filled sky. Lanterns floated gently above, mirroring the satellites silently orbiting overhead. Jessica stood beside Evan, reflecting on how far they had come. Yet, amid the triumphs, she was acutely aware of the work ahead. Satellite technology continued to evolve rapidly, bringing new challenges. Regulatory complexities, the risk of digital divides widening if access wasn't equitable, and the imperative to protect the night sky for future generations. The next morning, Jessica convened a roundtable with leading experts and advocates to draft a global charter for responsible satellite deployment. The charter emphasized sustainability, inclusivity, transparency, and respect for cultural and environmental concerns. Signatories committed to collaborative innovation and shared governance. Later that week, Jessica traveled to Washington, D.C., to meet with lawmakers to push for policies supporting the charter's principles. She testified before a congressional committee, urging them to consider the long-term impacts of satellite proliferation alongside the immediate benefits. Her testimony was powerful, blending data with personal stories from communities around the globe. In the halls of power, Jessica forged alliances with unexpected partners. From environmental groups to telecom companies seeking to adapt to the changing landscape. Together, they shaped legislation that balanced innovation with stewardship. Meanwhile, Evan embarked on a fellowship at a cutting-edge aerospace lab, diving deeper into satellite miniaturization and AI integration. Their daily calls were filled with excitement over discoveries and a shared vision for the future. Back in Bellwood, Jessica expanded SkyConnect Alliance's educational programs, introducing virtual reality simulations to train volunteers in emergency communication and satellite operations. The technology was immersive, giving participants a first-hand sense of the challenges and rewards of keeping communities connected in crises. One evening, Jessica received a message from a teacher in a remote village in Papua New Guinea. The school had just received Starlink-enabled smartphones, allowing students to participate in online classes for the first time. The teacher's words were simple but profound: "You have given us a window to the world." Tears filled Jessica's eyes as she shared the message with Evan. It was a reminder that every technical advance carried real human stories, stories of hope, resilience, and transformation. As the year drew to a close, Jessica reflected on the journey that had taken her from personal tragedy to global impact. The sky above Bellwood was clear, stars shimmering alongside the silent satellites tracing their paths. The work was far from done, but one truth remained steadfast: connection was a force for good, a light guiding humanity forward. In that moment, Jessica whispered a promise: to continue reaching for the stars, and to bring everyone along for the journey. Jessica's phone buzzed with a message from Evan, who was halfway across the globe at an aerospace innovation conference in Berlin. "Mom, they just unveiled a new AI-driven satellite control system. It's incredible: real-time adaptation, predictive rerouting, and optimized bandwidth allocation all rolled into one." She smiled, feeling proud of her son's passion and ingenuity. Their shared dream of revolutionizing global connectivity was becoming reality piece by piece. Back home in Bellwood, Jessica was focused on expanding SkyConnect Alliance's community engagement efforts. She believed that technology alone wasn't enough; empowerment came from education, local leadership, and building trust. The team launched a series of connectivity workshops aimed at training volunteers to support satellite internet deployment and troubleshoot common issues in their regions. The workshops combined hands-on technical instruction with storytelling sessions where participants shared how improved connectivity had transformed their lives. One volunteer, Marcus, a retired schoolteacher from a small Appalachian town, described how satellite phones had allowed his community to stay connected during a devastating flood. "Before, we were cut off for days. Now, we can coordinate rescue efforts and keep families informed," he said, eyes glistening. These personal accounts became the heartbeat of the workshops, inspiring others to join the movement. Meanwhile, Starlink's network was expanding into new frontiers. Remote islands in the South Pacific, mountainous villages in Nepal, and desert communities in the American Southwest were gaining access to reliable internet for the first time. Each deployment brought unique challenges: extreme weather, rugged terrain, limited infrastructure, but Jessica's team embraced these as opportunities to innovate. One breakthrough came with the development of portable solar-powered charging stations that could keep satellite devices operational in off-grid areas for extended periods. This innovation was particularly impactful in regions prone to natural disasters, where power outages were frequent and prolonged. Jessica coordinated with humanitarian organizations to distribute these stations alongside satellite phones during relief missions. The convergence of technology and compassion was palpable. On a larger scale, Jessica became an advocate for international cooperation in managing the increasing number of satellites orbiting Earth. The risk of collisions and space debris was real and growing, threatening the sustainability of satellite networks and the safety of astronauts. At the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, she presented proposals for shared satellite traffic management systems and debris mitigation strategies. Her approach emphasized collaboration over competition, highlighting how collective responsibility could preserve space as a resource for all humanity. The proposals gained traction, and Jessica was invited to join a global task force dedicated to implementing these frameworks. Despite the whirlwind of activity, Jessica carved out time for quiet moments with Evan and her community. One afternoon, they visited a rural school where children gathered excitedly around a mobile Starlink station. Jessica watched as the students connected to a virtual field trip, exploring coral reefs and rainforest canopies from thousands of miles away. The wonder on their faces was a testament to the transformative power of connectivity. Yet, not everything was seamless. A growing concern emerged around data privacy and digital security, especially in vulnerable communities unfamiliar with the risks of online exposure. Jessica realized that providing access was only the first step. Protecting users' information and educating them about cybersecurity were equally crucial. SkyConnect Alliance launched an initiative called Digital Guardians, training local leaders to become advocates for safe internet practices. The program included workshops on recognizing phishing scams, managing personal data, and reporting cyber threats. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with many participants expressing relief and newfound confidence in navigating the digital world. As the network matured, so did the technology. Jessica's team worked closely with SpaceX engineers to integrate advanced machine learning algorithms that optimized satellite operations, reducing latency and increasing reliability. These improvements enabled new applications: telemedicine consultations with specialists thousands of miles away, real-time agricultural monitoring using satellite imagery, and emergency alerts that could be personalized based on location and risk factors. The possibilities seemed endless. One of the most profound moments came during a natural disaster in the Philippines, where Typhoon Rai caused widespread destruction. Traditional communication networks were obliterated, but Starlink satellites provided a lifeline. Rescue teams used satellite phones to coordinate efforts, hospitals transmitted critical patient data, and displaced families connected with loved ones. Jessica coordinated with relief agencies, ensuring timely delivery of equipment and training. The experience reinforced the vital role of satellite connectivity in disaster resilience. Through all these milestones, Jessica remained grounded in her original mission, ensuring that no one was left in the digital shadows. She often reflected on Michael's words about the power of connection, feeling his presence in every success and setback. The journey was far from over, but the foundations were solid. Looking ahead, Jessica envisioned a future where satellite internet was as ubiquitous and reliable as electricity or clean water. She dreamed of a world where children everywhere could learn without barriers, where healthcare was accessible regardless of geography, and where communities could thrive through shared knowledge and opportunity. As she gazed at the stars one night, satellites quietly orbiting overhead, Jessica whispered, "This is just the beginning. We're connecting the world, one signal at a time." The momentum of the satellite connectivity revolution was undeniable, yet Jessica knew the path forward would demand even greater innovation and collaboration. One crisp autumn morning, she received an invitation to speak at the Global Innovation Forum in San Francisco, a gathering of top minds in technology, policy, and social impact. The theme was, Bridging the Digital Divide, Technology for Humanity. As she stepped onto the stage, Jessica felt a mix of nerves and resolve. She opened with a question that had driven her work from the start: what if every person on this planet had the power to connect, to learn, create, and share, no matter where they lived? Her words resonated deeply with the audience. She told stories from remote villages, disaster zones, and urban neighborhoods where Starlink's direct-to-smartphone technology was transforming lives. She shared data showing improved educational outcomes, economic growth, and emergency response times. The forum's energy was infectious, sparking conversations that spilled into late-night sessions and informal gatherings. Jessica connected with engineers developing next-generation satellite platforms, policy advocates crafting inclusive regulations, and social entrepreneurs harnessing connectivity for community empowerment. These encounters expanded her vision, inspiring new partnerships and projects. Back in Bellwood, Jessica's team was implementing lessons from the forum. They launched pilot programs integrating satellite connectivity with local health clinics, enabling telemedicine consultations that saved lives. They developed mobile learning hubs equipped with Starlink-enabled tablets and solar chargers, bringing interactive education to children in the most isolated regions. Each success reinforced the power of collaboration and adaptability. However, the rapid expansion of satellite networks raised pressing concerns about the cultural and environmental impacts of connectivity. In indigenous communities across the Arctic and Amazon, elders expressed worries about the erosion of traditional knowledge and the intrusion of global media. Jessica approached these conversations with humility, organizing listening sessions that honored local voices. She worked with cultural leaders to co-create digital literacy programs that respected heritage while offering new tools for storytelling and preservation. Environmentally, the increase in satellites orbiting Earth brought attention to light pollution and space debris. Jessica advocated for responsible satellite design and deployment practices, pushing for international agreements that balance technological progress with planetary stewardship. These efforts culminated in a landmark treaty adopted by the United Nations, a global commitment to sustainable space use. Meanwhile, Evan's work in Europe advanced dramatically. His research into AI-enhanced satellite communication systems showed promise for reducing latency and improving service quality in challenging conditions. The bond between mother and son remained strong, their shared dreams fueling late-night strategy calls and brainstorming sessions. One memorable moment came when Evan presented a prototype drone network capable of extending satellite signals deeper into urban canyons and dense forests. This innovation opened new possibilities for connectivity in places where line of sight to satellites was difficult. Jessica integrated the drone technology into SkyConnect's deployment plans, demonstrating once again the power of blending ingenuity with community needs. The year also brought unexpected personal challenges. Jessica faced moments of doubt and fatigue, weighed down by the enormous responsibilities and the memory of Michael. She found comfort in small rituals, morning runs beneath the open sky, weekly dinners with Evan and close friends, and letters from families touched by their work. These connections reminded her of the human heart beating at the center of every satellite signal. Then came a pivotal moment when a devastating earthquake struck a region in Central Asia. Communications infrastructure was decimated, leaving millions isolated. Within hours, Starlink satellites were rerouted, and emergency kits containing satellite phones and solar chargers were dispatched. Jessica coordinated with international relief organizations, leveraging her global network to mobilize resources swiftly. The impact was immediate and profound. Rescue teams communicated seamlessly, medical facilities accessed remote expertise, and displaced families reached out to loved ones. The disaster response showcased the true potential of satellite connectivity, not just as a convenience, but as a lifeline. In the months that followed, Jessica and her team analyzed lessons learned, improving response protocols and expanding emergency preparedness training worldwide. They forged new alliances with governments and NGOs committed to resilient communication infrastructure. These efforts reflected a growing recognition that technology must serve humanity's most urgent needs. As the chapter of another year closed, Jessica stood again under the vast night sky. The satellites traced silent arcs, invisible threads binding the world in a web of connection. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. The journey from a grieving mother in Bellwood to a global leader in digital equity was a testament to resilience, vision, and the power of connection. The future was still unfolding, but one thing was clear: technology, when guided by compassion and collaboration, could light the way toward a more connected, equitable world. Jessica whispered softly, "This is only the beginning. Together, we'll reach every corner of the earth." Jessica had learned that true progress was never a straight line. It was filled with unexpected detours, setbacks, and moments of breakthrough that often arrived when least expected. One morning, an urgent call from a partner in sub-Saharan Africa disrupted her routine. The newly deployed Starlink direct-to-smartphone network in a rural community was under threat, not from technology failure, but from political unrest and misinformation. Local leaders were skeptical of the technology, fueled by rumors that the satellites were spying tools or part of a foreign agenda. This mistrust threatened to undo months of hard-won progress. Jessica understood that technology alone could not overcome these barriers. She immediately organized a team to travel to the region, including local ambassadors, communication specialists, and engineers who could address both technical and cultural concerns. Upon arrival, Jessica engaged in open dialogues with community elders, youth groups, and civic leaders. She listened attentively as they voiced fears about privacy, cultural erosion, and external control. Rather than dismiss these concerns, Jessica acknowledged them as valid and shared transparent information about Starlink's mission, data privacy protections, and the community's role in shaping the project's future. They held workshops that combined technology demonstrations with storytelling, showcasing how satellite internet had empowered similar communities around the world to access education, healthcare, and economic opportunities while respecting their values and traditions. Gradually, trust began to rebuild. Local leaders agreed to collaborate on community-driven connectivity governance models, ensuring that decisions about technology use and data management were made collectively. This model became a blueprint for future deployments in sensitive regions, highlighting the importance of respect, inclusivity, and co-creation. Meanwhile, back in Bellwood, Evan was making significant strides in hardware miniaturization. His latest satellite chipset prototype promised to cut energy consumption by nearly half while boosting signal processing capabilities. This advancement opened doors for extending battery life on devices and improving service quality in challenging environments. Jessica celebrated these breakthroughs, knowing that innovation on the engineering front was vital to complement the social progress they were making. The team also faced challenges from competitors and skeptics who questioned the feasibility and sustainability of direct-to-smartphone satellite internet. Some industry giants argued that terrestrial networks were more efficient or raised concerns about the costs and complexity of maintaining satellite constellations. Jessica responded with data and real-world examples demonstrating how Starlink's technology reached places others could not. She emphasized the complementary nature of satellite and terrestrial networks, advocating for integrated solutions that prioritized users' needs over market competition. The dialogue helped foster collaboration rather than conflict, leading to joint ventures and shared infrastructure projects in several countries. On the advocacy front, Jessica intensified efforts to influence international policy frameworks. She worked closely with the International Telecommunication Union and other global bodies to establish standards for fair spectrum allocation, cross-border satellite coordination, and consumer protection. These efforts aimed to ensure that satellite internet remained accessible, affordable, and reliable for all, especially marginalized populations. One unexpected opportunity arose when Jessica was invited to consult on a humanitarian initiative focused on refugees in the Middle East. Refugee camps often suffered from poor connectivity, impeding access to education, legal services, and family communication. SkyConnect Alliance partnered with NGOs to deploy satellite-enabled mobile centers offering internet access, digital literacy training, and psychosocial support. The initiative was a powerful reminder of connectivity's role in restoring dignity and hope amidst hardship. As the network matured, Jessica's team embraced artificial intelligence not only in satellite operation but also in user experience. Personalized interfaces adapted to language preferences, literacy levels, and local cultural contexts, making technology intuitive and empowering. Feedback loops ensured continuous improvement based on community input. This human-centered approach set Starlink apart, emphasizing that technology should serve people's lives, not the other way around. Jessica also devoted time to mentoring young women and underrepresented groups interested in STEM fields. She believed that diverse voices were crucial to driving innovation and equitable solutions. Through scholarships, workshops, and virtual mentorship programs, she nurtured the next generation of leaders who would carry the mission forward. As the year progressed, Jessica found moments to reflect on the journey. The highs, the expanded connections, technological leaps, and stories of transformed lives, were balanced by the lows, the doubts, the political challenges, and the relentless pace that sometimes threatened to overwhelm. Yet, through it all, the core truth remained: connection was more than signals and satellites, it was about human stories, trust, and shared futures. One night, standing beneath a sky streaked with satellites, Jessica felt a profound sense of purpose. The path was winding and complex, but every challenge was a step toward a world where no one was isolated, where knowledge and opportunity flowed freely. The story of Starlink direct-to-smartphone was still being written, but its message was clear: technology, when wielded with empathy and integrity, could transform lives on a global scale. Jessica whispered to herself, "We're building bridges across stars and hearts alike." Jessica's schedule had become relentlessly packed, but she welcomed the challenge. The latest phase of Starlink's direct-to-smartphone rollout was underway, targeting dense urban centers where connectivity was paradoxically inconsistent due to infrastructure bottlenecks and high demand. While rural and remote communities had long been the priority, Jessica knew that bridging digital divides within cities was equally critical. She convened a diverse task force combining engineers, urban planners, sociologists, and local community leaders to design tailored deployment strategies. They focused on neighborhoods with historically limited access to broadband, including low-income districts and areas with large immigrant populations. The task force prioritized culturally sensitive outreach, ensuring language accessibility and inclusive communication. One of the early pilots launched in Detroit, a city with a rich industrial heritage but long-standing economic challenges. The team set up satellite hubs and distributed Starlink-enabled smartphones to residents, schools, and small businesses. Local workshops provided hands-on training in digital skills, online safety, and entrepreneurship. Community ambassadors, trusted residents trained by SkyConnect Alliance, played a pivotal role in fostering engagement and trust. The results were heartening. Students participated in virtual classrooms and STEM programs that expanded their horizons beyond traditional constraints. Small businesses accessed e-commerce platforms, connecting to customers worldwide. Healthcare providers utilized telemedicine to serve patients unable to travel easily. The project revitalized neighborhoods and generated optimism about technology as a tool for empowerment. However, the urban environment posed unique technical challenges. Buildings interfered with satellite signals, and spectrum congestion risked slowing service. Jessica's team collaborated with Evan, now leading a research group on adaptive signal processing and urban satellite network optimization. Together, they developed innovative phased array antennas capable of dynamically adjusting to environmental conditions, boosting reliability and speed. These advancements not only improved service in pilot cities but also informed future global deployments. Meanwhile, the SkyConnect Alliance expanded its educational mission, partnering with local schools and libraries to create digital literacy curricula. The programs emphasized critical thinking, cybersecurity, and the ethical use of technology. Jessica believed that fostering digital citizenship was vital for long-term social cohesion in an increasingly connected world. In parallel, Jessica addressed concerns raised by privacy advocates and civil rights organizations. She engaged in transparent dialogues about data protection policies, encryption standards, and user autonomy. The alliance implemented strict protocols to ensure that users maintained control over their information and that no unauthorized surveillance occurred through the satellite network. These commitments built confidence among communities and regulators alike. Globally, Jessica continued to push for equitable policies that reduced barriers to access. She worked with governments to subsidize devices for low-income populations and supported infrastructure investments that complemented satellite connectivity. In countries with restrictive internet policies, she advocated for the role of satellite networks in preserving open communication and freedom of expression. One powerful moment came when a young woman from a refugee camp shared how Starlink-enabled internet had allowed her to resume her education and reconnect with family members dispersed across continents. Her story became a symbol of hope and resilience, underscoring the human impact behind technological achievements. On the environmental front, Jessica championed initiatives to minimize the ecological footprint of satellite operations. She promoted the use of eco-friendly materials in satellite manufacturing and supported research into debris removal technologies. Public awareness campaigns educated users about responsible consumption and recycling of satellite devices. The alliance between technology and sustainability became a hallmark of Starlink's ethos. Despite the immense progress, Jessica remained vigilant about emerging challenges. Cybersecurity threats evolved rapidly, requiring continuous adaptation. Social dynamics shifted as connectivity altered economic and cultural landscapes, sometimes creating friction. Jessica embraced these complexities, believing that open communication and collaborative problem-solving were essential to navigating the future. Through all these endeavors, Jessica maintained a deep connection with the communities she served. Regular visits to pilot sites, listening sessions, and personal stories kept her grounded. She celebrated milestones with local leaders and volunteers, recognizing that the true power of technology lay in the people it empowered. As the chapter of urban expansion drew to a close, Jessica reflected on the journey with a renewed sense of purpose. From remote villages to bustling cities, the mission to connect the world was more than an engineering feat, it was a human story of hope, courage, and transformation. The stars above Bellwood shone brighter than ever, a silent reminder of the limitless possibilities ahead. Jessica whispered into the night, "We're weaving a tapestry of connection that spans every street and every soul." After years of development, deployment, and advocacy, the vision of universal, affordable connectivity was within reach. The final phase aimed to integrate satellite internet seamlessly with emerging 5G and edge computing infrastructures, creating a hybrid ecosystem that leveraged the strengths of each technology. This integration promised to deliver unprecedented speed, reliability, and accessibility for users everywhere. Jessica spearheaded the launch of a global pilot program in collaboration with telecom giants, governments, and tech innovators. The program focused on regions where terrestrial networks were expanding but still inadequate or uneven. By combining ground infrastructure with Starlink satellites, the hybrid network could dynamically route traffic to optimize performance and resilience. Early feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Users in sprawling metropolitan areas experienced fewer dropped calls and faster downloads, while residents in remote areas enjoyed consistent service previously unavailable. Small businesses thrived as digital marketplaces expanded, and healthcare providers delivered more timely and effective care through connected devices. The hybrid network also supported smart city initiatives, intelligent traffic management, environmental monitoring, and emergency response systems, enhancing urban living in measurable ways. As the network matured, Jessica remained attentive to the human dimension of technology. She led efforts to ensure that digital literacy programs evolved alongside infrastructure advances, incorporating new skills like data privacy management and critical analysis of online content. She partnered with educators, community organizers, and activists to foster inclusive, empowering learning environments. In parallel, Jessica engaged with international regulators to update policies reflecting the hybrid network's complexities. She advocated for open standards, interoperability, and equitable access, emphasizing that technological progress must not deepen existing inequalities. One unexpected challenge emerged when geopolitical tensions threatened to disrupt satellite operations over contested regions. Jessica navigated delicate diplomatic channels, emphasizing the nonpartisan, humanitarian nature of connectivity efforts. Through dialogue and transparency, she helped maintain cooperation and safeguard service continuity. Meanwhile, Evan continued to innovate in satellite hardware and software integration, driving improvements in energy efficiency and artificial intelligence capabilities. His work on autonomous satellite swarm management increased network resilience, enabling rapid adaptation to environmental changes and technical failures. The mother-son collaboration remained a pillar of strength and creativity for SkyConnect Alliance. Public recognition of Jessica's work grew, culminating in prestigious awards honoring her leadership in technology and social impact. Yet, she remained humble, crediting the countless collaborators, volunteers, and communities who made the vision possible. Reflecting on the journey, Jessica recognized that connection was not merely about technology but about building trust, nurturing relationships, and empowering individuals. She documented lessons learned and best practices, contributing to a growing body of knowledge that would guide future digital inclusion efforts worldwide. As the world edged closer to truly global connectivity, Jessica's thoughts turned to the next frontier, space-based internet for interplanetary missions. The ambition to extend human communication beyond Earth symbolized the limitless potential of innovation fueled by compassion and cooperation. Standing beneath a sky now crisscrossed with satellites, Jessica whispered, "From our homes to the stars, connection is the thread that binds us all." The Starlink direct-to-smartphone network had grown from a bold idea into a global reality, touching lives from remote villages to megacities, bringing education, healthcare, economic opportunity, and hope. Yet, as Jessica reflected on the incredible progress, she knew the journey was as much about human resilience and collaboration as it was about technology. The final chapter of this story unfolded with a profound lesson: technology's true power lies in its ability to unite and uplift humanity. As the global rollout completed, Jessica witnessed firsthand the transformations enabled by connectivity. A teacher in a small Alaskan town used satellite internet to stream lessons to isolated students scattered across frozen tundras. A young entrepreneur in Kenya launched an online marketplace connecting artisans to international buyers. Families separated by conflict reconnected through video calls, sharing moments that transcended borders and barriers. Jessica's team focused on embedding sustainable practices into every facet of the network. Satellites were designed for easy deorbiting to minimize space debris. Devices were recyclable and energy efficient. Educational programs emphasized digital literacy and responsible use, nurturing communities equipped not only to connect but to thrive. The alliance of governments, corporations, NGOs, and local communities grew stronger, united by a shared commitment to bridge divides and foster inclusion. Jessica also embraced the personal dimension of her mission. She reconnected with old friends, found joy in simple moments with Evan, and honored the memory of Michael by dedicating scholarship programs in his name, nurturing the next generation of innovators inspired by the belief that technology could change the world. As the Starlink constellation expanded, so too did the vision. Plans emerged to extend connectivity beyond Earth, to astronauts, lunar colonies, and future Mars missions, carrying the human story into the cosmos. Jessica's reflections turned to the future with optimism grounded in experience. She recognized that challenges would persist, technical, social, political, but that a foundation built on empathy, collaboration, and innovation would guide humanity through whatever lay ahead. In her final public address as CEO of SkyConnect Alliance, Jessica shared a message that resonated worldwide: connection is more than wires, signals, or satellites. It is the human spirit reaching out, the threads of community weaving together across continents and cultures. It is love, hope, and the unyielding drive to share our stories, dreams, and lives. This journey reminds us that no matter where we come from or what obstacles we face, we are stronger together. The speech was met with standing ovations and tears, a testament to the profound impact of her work. Under the endless sky dotted with satellites, Jessica felt a deep peace.